huge impact, not just in the telecom sector, but also across the board. To make sense of it, Rajeev Chandrasekhar, Rajya Sabha MP, joins us for more. Rajeev, of course, is one of the first entrepreneurs in the telecom sector in India. He's also been vociferously speaking against the policy and how the whole 2G scam erupted. Rajeev, thanks for joining us. You know, they've got lots of questions for you, but my first question is really, this is a closure of sorts, isn't it, to something that had been flagged off by the media, flagged off by people like you for so long, and finally you've had the Supreme Court intervening, cancelling these licenses. Well, we seem to be having a slight audio problem. We will reconnect with Rajeev in just a second. But meanwhile, let's quickly get you some reactions that we got from corporate lawyers like HP Ranina on this case.
Well, I would say that the industry has been completely shaken up by this judgment. It will have such far-reaching implications that obviously in future I think companies will be extremely shy in getting into agreements where they feel that there is any element of, untoward work being done. So really speaking, I think this judgment is an eye-opener for everybody, that you have to be very particular about what is being done, and you can't do anything which in any way will impinge on your profitability in course of time.
HP Ranina saying that it's a bit of a shocker, but let's reconnect with Rajeev. Rajeev, your reaction to the judgment? It is a closure on an issue that has been, spoken about and debated for some time.
Yeah, I think this is a landmark judgment because I think it establishes once and for all that there is a law called the TRA Act that governs what the DOT can or cannot do. And there are clearly, and the decision of the Supreme Court to cancel these licenses on the basis of illegalities of law. This is nothing to do with corruption. This is nothing to do with the larger discussion about, A. Raja and all of that. This is really where the Supreme Court has found that these 122 licenses have been issued in violation of the TRA Act and in violation of the laid down policy. And so these licenses were illegal and were deemed and were needed to be cancelled.
Rajeev, this is being seen as a setback for the UPA also because of the back and forth that they have done on this case, on the size of this case, etc. Do you think it's a bit of a setback, and how do you see the government reacting to something like this?
No, I don't know. Look, my pay scale in Parliament isn't large enough for me to comment on the UPA or the NDA, so I will stay away from controversies like that. But let me just say this. I think the government now should really step up and say, these are the right ways of doing licensing. This is the right way to send confidence to investors from all over the world, that we will, we have a great telecom sector, we have great entrepreneurs, we have great market opportunity, but the whole issue of licensing should be done in a manner that is transparent, and the Supreme Court has clearly said today that it should be through auctions, and that is the way to do it. And this has been known to the government and to people for many, many years. People have written about it, talked about it, debated in Parliament about this. This is a no-brainer. We should just say, okay, fine, what is done is done. The people who have done wrong will pay the price and will suffer the consequences. But moving forward, let us quickly restore the confidence back in the sector by strengthening the independent regulation, by strengthening the Act, and making sure that the rules for licenses and new licenses are completely transparent and through the auction route.
Okay. This clears the air on a lot of uncertainty in the sector for sure, Rajeev. But one way of looking at it is also, it has changed the goalposts for a lot of foreign investors who came in, and they are already claiming that, we just followed the rules of the game. It's not our fault that you got it wrong. You had, a back and forth on policy. So on the whole, is this going to be a setback for foreign investment, or do you think it's going to clear the decks for it?
Yeah, I think if there is a loser in all of this, it is these foreign investors who have in a lot of ways invested in good faith in the Indian story, the Indian telecom story. So I frankly have nothing but sympathies for the Telenors of the world, or the other foreign investors who've reached out and invested in the Indian telecom story. But there is an underlying truth that emerges from all of this, which is that regardless of how strong and attractive the Indian telecom story is, you have to exercise due diligence, and you have to exercise some amount of care in terms of who you invest in and who you invest with. And you have to establish that these public assets that are at play here have been legally, lawfully, been obtained to conduct a commercial business. So, yes, I think sympathies are legitimately due to these foreign investors who have, in good faith, come to India and are now suffering the consequences of what is obviously, a series of illegalities. But the good news is there are many investors, foreign investors, who invested in the Indian telecom story that are doing very well and who've taken the necessary care, they've taken the necessary precaution in making sure that they, they do exercise the right amount of due diligence and the right amount of homework before they invest.
Rajeev, now let me get to some specific modalities, Rajeev, because as we've been pointing out on this channel, this has huge ramifications. The consolidation that we were all talking about for the last 2 years, 2.5 years, or the weaker hands getting out, all of that comes into play. But that's the next step. The first step is the fact that after 4 months, there is going to be a possible auction of these licenses. Now, the circumstances have changed so much between the last 2G license auction, the sale, and the 3G license auction. So how do you see it really panning out? On the valuation front, because at the heart of this entire 2G debate was on the valuations of how the government got shortchanged because they use a first come, first serve kind of an approach.
Yeah, there are two consequences of today's decision. One is, like you correctly said at the beginning of the program, the overall sentiment towards the sector, the overall perception of risk towards the sector. And that is something that only the government can address, and they can address it very simply by taking a series of steps that basically give out a signal of better transparency and better public policy management. So that's point number one. The second thing is that there is an impact on the consumers of India, because there are a number of consumers who are on these networks who will have to be necessarily, ported or transported to other networks. And don't forget one thing. One of the arguments used by A. Raja all along for these 122 licenses was that he was increasing competition and therefore increasing consumer choice and therefore improving affordability. Having 122 licenses disappear from the scene will alter the competitive landscape, and therefore as important today for those 122 licenses to remain active, albeit through a process of re-auction, but that must be done quickly so that the competitive landscape remains the same. So there are two aspects to it, just to summarize. One is this issue of competition and the consumer's benefit, and the other is this whole investor sentiment issue that needs to be addressed. But both of these have to be addressed, and both of these can be very, very easily addressed by the government if they are proactive about this.
The competitive landscape, is this going to just shake out the weak players and strengthen the hand of the incumbents, the big guys over here? Because that's the other thing that they've been complaining about, the lack of spectrum. And in the circumstances, after splurging on 3G, there are only a handful of companies that can invest the money now, Rajeev.
Yeah, but that is, I mean, I don't think that is the job of public policy to take care. I mean, if people can invest, they will invest. If they cannot invest, they will, they will fade away. That is not the job of either Parliament or the government to make sure people have enough money to invest. It is, you create a public policy that is fair, offers equal opportunity for companies to invest and do well and get market share. But beyond that, if one company is better capitalized and can take losses for the longer run and the other company is less capitalized, that is market dynamics. That is not something that public policy or government policy should attempt to address and can address.
Let me reword the question, Rajeev. As somebody who's observed the industry and seen the evolution of the industry, how do you see this having an impact on the landscape of the industry? Do you think there will be a shakeout? Do you think the incumbents will be standing to benefit? And how do you see it progressing from here?
There will be a shakeout, and the incumbents, the strong companies will do well if the government sits on its backside and doesn't do anything today. If the government moves fast and establishes and re-establishes the confidence in the sector, there are many investors all over the world who would like to be part of the Indian telecom story. But the government creates a scenario, a situation where you let this uncertainty linger, you let the perception of high risk linger, then obviously the companies who are strong today will continue to become stronger, because no new companies will come in and increase competition. And that is exactly the point. If the Indian consumer is to be kept in mind, the government must move quickly, address these issues of uncertainty and risk that have crept in as a consequence of January 2008, establish a new policy. Mr. Sibal has been talking about an NTP 2011 and it's 2012 now. He should come out with an NTP 2012.